Welcome back. In this video we're going to take our base sand texture and turn it into a shader suitable for a large-scale desert environment. So here we are where we left off at the end of the sand sculpture shader video, and we're going to make a few adjustments to our scene. First of all, I'm going to get rid of my image reference because I don't need that. We're going to hide Suzanne in the outliner. So we'll just turn it off in viewport and render mode. I want to unhide my camera, and we have a sun object in the scene. Now I think I want to use the sun texture or the sky texture that's built into Blender, so I'm also going to hide that as well. Let's just make a little bit of space by hitting N and closing that panel. We're going to add a mesh plane to our scene. Now at the moment our mesh comes in with a scale set to 2 meters by 2 meters. Let's change this scale up to 500 meters. So we've got a much larger environment. You can see our scale has changed to 250. Let's hit Control A and reset our scale to 1. You can see our dimensions stay the same. With our plane selected, let's add in our base sand material. You can see we have our nice base sand. We are going to duplicate that object and change its name from sand.001 to sand desert. Next, we want to start working on our displacement. So at the moment, if we just look at our scene, we have this plane and our camera's probably somewhere in the middle of it. So if we look at it there, our camera's right there. Let's just go into our top view. We're going to rotate this around about 45 degrees. And we're just going to move it up in Y, so when our camera looks at our plane, now we're seeing a lot more of that. Now at the moment our plane is 500 by 500 meters, which means from corner to corner we're getting quite a big distance. Now at this very large distance the camera may start clipping, so let's just check. In our lens we have our clip end at 100 meters, so what our camera will do is once it gets to 100 meters it's just going to stop seeing any more of that plane. Just to make sure that doesn't happen, let's change this value to 1000 meters. Now you can even see that we're seeing much more of that plane now. With our plane selected, we want to make a few adjustments so that we can do some displacement on that. So add a subdivision surface modifier. We'll change that to simple, and we'll turn on adaptive subdivision. In our render settings, we'll just go down and make sure in subdivision we have this set. So at the moment I've got viewport set to 2. I'm going to change this to 4 because I think 2 is probably a bit too fine for this. And we can also choose our camera in our dicing camera. So when we do a render, nothing outside the camera's field of view is actually going to get subdivided. With our plane selected again, let's go into material properties. Under settings and surface, change this to displacement only. Within render settings, we should have experimental mode already turned on. And we are, of course, using cycles. Let's close this panel down a little bit. And let's just check our environment. We'll go from object to world. And at the moment, we just have this grey background. So I want to add in a texture here. We're going to add in the sky texture. We'll connect up the color to the color. And we'll turn off our default HDRI by turning on scene world. So we'll be using this world setting and any lights in our scene. You can see this is incredibly bright at the moment. So let's change our altitude up to something like 1200 meters. And we start getting that blue sky coming in. We can increase our ozone to make that blue sky even bluer. I think around about 5 should be fine. We'll add in a little bit more dust. Add in a little bit more air. I don't actually want the sun in the scene, so if we change our rotation, you can see if we change it and increase the number of degrees here, it'll go to the right. So if we take that to 90 degrees, we know it will be coming down from the right hand side onto our sand, and it's coming down at an angle of 15 degrees. We'll maybe change that to something a little bit higher, just because generally in the desert, during midday, the sun is right overhead. Let's change that to something like 60 degrees. That should give us slightly more accurate lighting in our scene. Now we can go back to our object And this is our material as it is just now. So we want to make some adjustments here because we want to be using displacement. So we're going to add in a vector displacement node, plug that directly into displacement. And then the main component of this displacement is going to be a Voronoi map. So we'll grab Voronoi, we'll plug our distance into our height. We will hit Ctrl T to add in our texture coordinate and mapping node. We'll change this to object. So at the moment you can see the effect we have. It's not exactly what we're looking for. Let's check our Voronoi texture. And yeah, it's a little bit crazy. It's not what we want really. We want to also make sure our surface is plugged in. So we're always looking at that sand texture. The scale of the sand is way off at the moment as well, but that's something we will fix at the end. So with the mapping set to point, if we increase this scale, what you'll see is this will get much finer. It's a little bit hard to tell because of the displacement, but if we take that to something like 500, you should be able to see it doesn't get any smaller. These little peaks stay the same. If we change this to texture, however, with a scale of 500, you can see it all goes away. Let's just look through that Voronoi texture just now and look at it from the top view. And this is actually around about the scale we want at the moment. So from here, we'll probably see 1, 2, 3, maybe a few different peaks. Let's look again from our camera point of view. Now at the moment, I think our camera is actually locked. So let me just select the camera. And it's all locked at the moment. So we'll turn off all those locks. We'll raise our camera up a little bit. And we'll maybe just rotate it down a little bit to look more down at the sand. Now I don't want to do this too much. We'll keep the horizon right in the middle, because when we increase the scale on our displacement, which at the moment is set to 1, these peaks are going to fly up. So let's take that scale to maybe something like 100. Okay, and you can see that we're getting some really high peaks there. We'll maybe take that down to about 50. And that might be a little bit better. Let's take the height of our camera up some more. Okay, so now we're really seeing some of those peaks. And again, we'll just rotate down a little bit. Now we can always rotate our environment around if you want to get a better view. Maybe pick something that you think looks a little bit more interesting. I think I'm happy with that view at the moment. We can maybe take this scale up a little bit higher, maybe to about 75. And again, we can just adjust our camera a little bit more as well. Maybe rotate that down to see what's happening. And I think I'm pretty happy with that view. Let's go back to our shader. Make sure we are looking through our sand shader. Everything seems pretty bright in here at the moment. Let's go to world. And let's change this strength down a little bit. Let's try about 0.5. Okay, so we're just getting a little bit more contrast. One other thing we could change is in the render settings. We scroll all the way down to the bottom to color management. At the moment we have this set to filmic and a look of none. If we change this to something like high contrast or very high contrast, we could also adjust some of the settings in here. We also have things like low contrast, which in actual fact looks a little bit more contrasty to me. And we also have exposure, so we could turn down the exposure potentially as well. We are in a very outdoor environment, so maybe something like negative 1.5 will give us a nicer result in there. We'll change this back to none in our contrast settings. That's always something you can do in post-processing. I think I quite like the look of this at the moment. Okay, so it's challenge time. So your challenge is to experiment by moving your camera around your desert environment. Try and find some interesting looking peaks and valleys in your environment where you can put your camera to get the best position possible. Experiment with your sky shader settings. These are pretty simple. Just adjust the air, the dust, the ozone, the elevation, the sun size and strength, and also its rotation and height. Once you're happy with your settings, save your file and you can use that later on. Now, once you've done that, join me in the next video and we'll finish off this desert sand shader. See you then.